Before we get into today's episode, I have a very important reminder to everybody to please get out and vote. Your vote matters and your voice deserves to be heard. This is going to be one of the closest elections of our lifetime. Please, please, please make sure you make a plan to vote and vote early if you can. So go to iwillvote.com or vote.org for more information on how you can get involved in this election and make sure that your voice is heard. Welcome to Outdoorsy, the podcast where we're redefining what it means to be outdoorsy and reclaiming the word itself. I'm your host, Madeline. I am honored to introduce a guest whose work just beautifully ties into our mission here with the podcast. Laura is an outdoor boudoir photographer based in the Pacific Northwest, and she's someone who just truly understands how marginalized people, whether you're fat, queer, or simply outside of the traditional mold, can feel excluded from the outdoorsy community as a whole. Through their photography, Laura not only celebrates all bodies and identities, but also shows that we just all belong in nature, whoever we are and whatever we look like. Their sessions aren't just about creating stunning portraits in the wilderness, they're also about helping people feel at home in their own skin, surrounded by the landscapes we often so think are reserved for a typical type of person, right? Laura specialized in fat positive, weight neutral portraiture and queer and poly friendly photography, reminding us that we are all part of nature and we all deserve to see ourselves reflected in it. I'm so excited to dive into Laura's story and explore how her work helps make the outdoors more inclusive for everyone. Laura, welcome to the show. So, Laura, let's just start off with the first question, which is how do you define outdoorsy?
Uh, I'm gonna give a really annoying answer. I just think it's as simple as like someone enjoying being outside. And that can be as simple as gardening, that could be as simple as like taking a walk outside. Like, if you enjoy being outside, then you fucking belong outside. You know what I mean? Like, then that's outdoorsy. But I think so often, at least I grew up semi outdoorsy, and like the word outdoorsy is so intimidating that it can feel like, oh, you have to summit this mountain, or you have to like do this like strenuous hard thing where you have to travel really far and your body hurts. But I'm just a big fan of like you can go to an urban park and having that being outside, or like going outside in your neighborhood, or like walking around, or I don't know, just like sunbathing like a lizard. I just like anything outdoors that you enjoy, like that's outdoorsy.
Lizard time. I heard you touch on that, just being a little lizard out in the sunshine and soaking it all up, whatever it might be, as long as you're just outdoors and enjoying it. That's
Yeah.
outdoorsy to me too. I think you nailed it perfectly. And that's been such a through line with all of the podcast interviews I've been doing. Everybody's just like, "Oh, do you like being outdoors? Are you enjoying being outdoors? Okay, cool. You're outdoorsy."
Yeah, yeah. I feel like outdoorsy is, I mean, this is why the whole podcast exists, right? But like, there's so much gatekeeping and like just bullshit around like what is considered outdoorsy or not. And yeah, I mean, especially like wearing lingerie and doing outdoor boudoir photography. And I do also family photography outside, but doing lingerie like outside is so fucking powerful and I love it so much. And that's outdoorsy. Like wearing lingerie outside and taking photos is outdoorsy.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I am so excited to hear more about your journey and adventures in that particular area. But before we even get there, I want to take a step back and just kind of ask you about your relationship to the outdoorsy community. Like, you mentioned like growing up, like, did you grow up super outdoorsy? Kind of talk to me about your relationship to the outdoors as a whole.
Yeah. I grew up on Whidbey Island, which is not too far away from Seattle where I'm at now. Um, and it's stunning. I love visiting the outdoorsy part of Whidbey Island, not so much the other areas, but uh I didn't grow up, I mean, half and half. Like we went camping because I'm a middle child of five and we like didn't have a lot of money. So camping was like the vacations. So I do have some experience that growing up, and I don't know how my parents did it with so many kids. That sounds absolutely like hell, but shout out to my parents for doing that. But we didn't go like hiking. We didn't go on walks even. Like we didn't spend a lot of time outside. My mom's into gardening. So like I just got, that's why I'm like I grew up like semi outdoorsy, but didn't spend a ton of time outside except for water, like lakes, water, beaches, like water baby through and through. So like that is where my heart and soul is in the water. Um and so like where I'm at now is like, growing up as even an adult in college, like I, went to college in Seattle, lots of white people who like being outdoors, and it was like very intimidating to be like, I don't know, like I'm fat, like I don't really belong outside, or like what do I, like all of that sounds hard because I just associated being outdoorsy with being like strenuous activities, or like things like skiing or snowboarding that require a ton of expensive and specific gear. um and it wasn't until I found like a community of fat people here, and fat people like took me outside, that it was like, oh, this is how you do it. This is how you stay safe. This is how it works for your body. And I don't know. I have a complicated relationship with the outdoorsy community because so much of it is like beautiful and wonderful. And I resonate with, I think a lot of us have major things in common. And then there's that other piece of like finding any plus size friendly safe gear is like fucking impossible. um and then not feeling outdoorsy enough or not doing something strenuous enough. I mean, like, I don't know, I'm like, which way do you want to go? There's so many different directions to talk about how the outdoorsy is so terrible. Outdoorsy culture is so terrible. um yeah, I don't know if I really answered your question, but I'm like, I have so many thoughts.
You absolutely no, you answered it really well. And I think that I want to kind of dive into maybe the more positive side of what you were talking about, which is you did mention that you did find community. You found a community of people who were like you and that were able to kind of teach you like, hey, like we can actually do shit outside, and or here's the gear that actually works for our bodies and keeps us safe or whatever it might be. So I'd love for you to share a little bit more about the community that you found and how that has supported you and helped kind of like heal that relationship a little bit.
Okay, that's funny that you use the word heal because as you were starting to ask this question, I was like, okay, there's so much hyper individualism, period, I guess, the end of that sentence. But then, too, like, I think there's also this pressure that we have to heal by ourselves or like go to therapy or do all this work on our own to then like be ready for whatever it is, a relationship or, doing these things outside, whatever. But so much of healing is in community or with other people. Like I think of like the community center. I go to the pool like 4 or 5 times a week because I love being in the water and I want to be there all the time. And I was so nervous and anxious to go to a pool or just like go to the lake or whatever in my little bikini, my fat kini. And it wasn't until I went with someone else that then I was like, okay, now I know what to expect. And now I kind of know, where to put my things or just like little things like that, like knowing what to expect. And it took going with someone, sometimes multiple times, to like get comfortable. And I feel like the same thing with outdoors. Like I had at the time a friend that took me hiking and like told me what gear to get or like brought extra gear in her backpack or like brought extra water and like told us about the trail, and at any point, we would turn around. Like the point was that we were going to enjoy being outside and enjoy nature around us and enjoy spending time with each other. The goal wasn't to like conquer a mountain or whatever the fuck, right? Like we can also just like respect and enjoy the land around us without there being like a certain end point. And so much of that, everything I've learned, probably that I'm going to say in this podcast, was learned either with or from someone else, right? Like there's so much of healing that happens in community with other people. And there's just this pressure that we have to do it alone. And, I'm a big fan of like solo camping or solo hiking, but also like we need other people, right, to like show us the ropes and like make sure that we're safe, make sure that we have all the access that we need and those kinds of things.
For a lot of the people that I have connected with in my community online and through this podcast, a lot of people have had not so great experiences with other people in the outdoorsy community, whether they've like joined a hiking group and got left behind, or they teamed up with someone and yeah, they ditched them on a mountain or something like that. So then they turn to this hyper independence where they're like, well, I guess I have to just go by myself. Or they're embarrassed about their fitness level. And so they're like, well, I can't keep up, and or stressed, or they don't have the fancy gear so they don't look like other people on the trail. And so they just either don't go, or then they just go alone and then sometimes put themselves in unsafe situations because they're not ready for it yet. What advice would you have to anybody that's listening right now who maybe is feeling that way but still is like, okay, I understand I probably should find community, I probably should maybe go out with someone who is more similar to me and has more either an identity that's more aligned with mine or values more aligned with mine. How do people even kind of get started with finding the right community for them?
Ugh, what a big question. I wish I had like an easy answer, you know what I mean? But I
You
think,
could just speak to your experience too. You can talk just about how, you were able to find people and start
yeah,
there.
I feel like it's the two things that are coming up to mind is like either one, the current people that you're with, having a conversation and saying, can we establish some, I don't know, ground rules or use another word or whatever. But like for me and my partner is smaller than me. And so when he was like really excited about wanting to hike or be outside, and we ended up doing the 52 hike challenge, which like burnt me the fuck out of hiking. I'm just now like this year, this past like month or two, been like, oh, that sounds fun again. But that was like in 2021 that we were like, went hard. Um, and even when he approached me first, I was so nervous and I was like, oh yeah, like maybe. Oh. And then after a few conversations was like, okay, yes, I want to do this. I want to enjoy being outside with you, but here's what I need in order for us to do that. And what I need is the slowest person sets the pace. We don't like the goal is not to make it to whatever arbitrary end point there is. Like the viewpoint is along the way. Like we're going to enjoy nature. We're not going to rush. Like this, the point and the focus is to spend time with each other and be outside. And having those expectations, that's a better word than ground rules, but having those expectations like clarified helped kind of alleviate so much of the like anxiety and pressure that I felt to like move faster than what my body could or push past any pain or just like feel like I need to fit into this mold rather than saying, okay, I want to be outside. Here's how it works for me. So that's like the first thing is like have a conversation or like set those expectations. And if they can't do it, then that's fine, but those aren't your vibe. Like that's not your people. And then the other thought that I had was like, looking for like there's so many like hiking groups and, you know, they're all really lovely and beautiful and all are a group of people that have, you know, there will be conflicts and some problematic thoughts. And I mean, like, that's just not, that's like community. um, and yeah, so I'm like, Unlikely Hikers does these things. There's like Fat Girls Hiking, if that's the vibe, or just like all these other groups on Facebook are really helpful or what. I feel like that's kind of like the advice that I was given. And honestly, I just like think like I don't know, just like approaching people. I know it sounds kind of weird, but I started hosting Fat Swim here. I do a monthly Fat Swim in Seattle because I love being outside and I love being in the water and I love like wanted to build a community. And part of that was like, oh, I'm missing like there's not a place for that. And then actually somewhere in California, in the Bay Area, they have like a weekly Fat Swim, and I was totally inspired and like fell in love with what they do. They've been doing it for 40 years, and it was like also a reminder. Side note tangent. This is also a reminder of like I don't know. Sometimes it can be like, oh, this really sucks, but then it's like, oh, people have been in this. Like there are elders in our fat liberation movement too, and sometimes I forget about that. Anyways, side note, was very encouraged that it's been happening for 40 years. Um, and then it was like, I want to have it here in Seattle. So I'm also like, if you want to have a certain community, like who's stopping you from building that? It is a shit ton of work. So I guess that could be stopping you from that. But it is, I don't know. I'm like, if you find a niche and are wanting a thing, then what's stopping you from creating it? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I love hearing that from you because it's similar to what I've heard in some of the other conversations I've had with people. It's like One, if there's something that you want but it doesn't exist yet, feel empowered to start it on your own. I think that a lot of people forget that that's even an option. And even if it's like three people, that's still more than just you, and that's still starting to build on community. So I think that's really an important reminder. And then the other thing that I heard you say was like, there are so many niche groups and communities that already exist. So you don't necessarily have to start one fresh and new. Try to do some initial research online, whether that's through social media or just like seeing who like seeing if there's someone out there who looks like you on social media, see who they're following and who they're engaging with on social media and see if maybe there's a community there already. Like I was talking to this woman named Jasmine, and she's an outdoor educator and stuff. And she was telling me about how her initial experience in the outdoorsy kind of like community or like a hiking club in college was like in Southern California. It was mostly white people. And she was like, these are not my people. And she got
Yeah.
plugged into Black Girls Trekking. And she was like, it was a game changer because suddenly we were, yes, we all come from different backgrounds, but we had the shared commonality of this identity. And that is what made all the difference for her. So, for everybody out there listening, like, there's probably already a niche community that fits what you're looking for. And if not, please feel empowered to do it on your own. Like, just do it, try.
Yeah. And it's so powerful. I mean, speaking to my fat experience, like when I feel like my fatness was like my biggest identifier or like the biggest, well, ironically, the biggest thing about me, LOL, but also like since being in community with other fat people, I'm like, it's the least interesting thing about me. And that's where I'm like, these other parts of my personality or my life can like be highlighted and like have their time to shine instead of it just being about my fatness, if that makes sense. Like, I know that's kind of a nuanced conversation, but um, it's been really, really helpful to like, oh, we have this thing in common. What else? Like, there's other things about our lives and our experiences and our stories that are more important than our body size. And also, like, our body size is important because it's important to the world and yada, yada, yada. But that has also been like a relief to find other people and commonalities.
Yeah, that's incredible. I want to talk more about kind of inclusivity in the outdoorsy space in just a second. But before we get there, I want to give you an opportunity to kind of talk about your journey into this niche of photography. I know you do families and stuff too, but I just think there's something about boudoir, specifically boudoir in the outdoors, and specifically boudoir for people who exist in marginalized bodies. Like, there's so much to unpack there, and so much that's so powerful and incredible and beautiful about that. I am not surprised that you got into that just from talking to you and seeing the person that you are. But I want to hear about how did you even get started doing that? Like, tell us. I'm so curious.
Yeah, I don't have like a succinct way to talk about this. um, I mean, I guess like my favorite conversation or my favorite topic of conversation is sex, dating, and love and bodies and what our bodies can do. And I don't know, just the phenomenon that our bodies are constantly changing. And yet we live in a world that is very white supremacist and sizist and ableist. I mean, all the things that tells us that our bodies should be stagnant, which is so interesting because nature in and of itself is never stagnant. Um, and there's so much beautiful different shapes and sizes and growth. And I don't know, I'm just like, nature is stunning. And, it's like the cliche of like, you don't compare flowers against each other. Like flowers are all just beautiful the way that they are, however their leaves land, however, it's just like we don't question that. Um and so, I grew up in a house with lots of trauma going on. And at the time, we grew up very religious. I'm not religious anymore. Um and like grew up thinking that I wanted to be a therapist for folks who had experienced any sexual trauma. And that was really lovely. I mean, it led me to get my degree, and I worked in social services for over a decade. I was doing some really intense like social work with folks who were working in the sex trade, either, as sex workers, being exploited in the sex trade. I mean, there's lots of nuance there, but I also just loved talking about it and loved talking about like I don't know, people's stories around sex and sexual shame and how that plays and how that shows up and how that impacts our bodies and how our bodies heal from trauma. I mean, all of those things are so fascinating to me. And I thought that I was going to go down the therapist route, went to grad school, um, and said, fuck no. And yeah, and then I was still in this work, was totally burnt out of social work. So then I stopped doing that and got a boring day job. And that was so lovely. And also, like, my ADHD, realizing how my brain works, like I need some stimulus, I need some things that are interesting to me that I'm passionate about. And I just missed talking to people about bodies and sex and their relationship to each other and healing. And all of those things are so intertwined. And I've also, so that was this like one thing happening. And then this other piece of photography, I mean, I grew up in a very small town and I was hired when I was 12 years old to photograph someone's wedding, which is like
What?
awful for them. Great for me, but awful for them.
I have so many questions.
Can you imagine hiring a 12-year-old for your wedding? I mean, that is to like photograph and no, like
I
it
can
would
barely think of hiring a 12-year-old to do anything. So,
do anything.
yeah,
Correct. Correct. Yes.
incredible.
Different time in the world. I feel very old saying that, but it really did feel like a totally different time. And part of that, I don't know, it was just like small town church, religious vibes. Anyways, but so that was like this love of photography. And, I've hired boudoir photographers for my own self to like celebrate, a milestone in therapy or a new job or whatever. And it's always been something that has been so important to me in my own healing of sexual shame and like growing up very religious and like that religious trauma. So like there's these two worlds that like kind of merged all in one of like, oh, like boudoir photography. And also like there's this other part of me that was like, oh, I, love being outside. And I've totally burnt out of hiking because I did the 52 hike challenge and it was really lovely and powerful and I felt so strong and also was like, I hate it. So I was just like craving being outside more because being outside felt so healing. I felt so present being outside and just like I just missed it. I missed being outside on a regular basis, but felt like hiking wasn't the vibe, but I still wanted something similar to hiking. So quite literally, it was just like, oh, why don't I like mix them all together? And then there's boudoir photography. um, and then, as classic ADHD, like once you have an idea, it was like, okay, I'm going to go 150% and just like hyperfixate and like see what happens. And yeah, then like one thing led to another. Yeah. And then the other part of that story is when I applied for my business license, I was very, very sad. Like that week was a really tough week. I was like, haven't felt, it was like dipping a toe back into depression a little bit that time in my life and just had lots of different things going on. Um, Lots of really wonderful things at the same time. Like I married my best friend and that was really beautiful and lovely. And anyways, but then I was working a job that I hated. Was just like not going outside. I was just feeling sad, feeling stuck. I had like lost some of my community to various things. And I was just in this place of like, oh, I really need something new. Like I need a new change. I need to start something new. And then it was all of those passions that kind of like merged into one. Just like, oh, let me try this and like see what happens. And then I met all these wonderful people and then started building community with Fat Swim. And I mean, it just kind of, it felt like they all like lined up or like, I don't know. It just felt like it fell into place.
It's incredible. I love hearing your story about how you had all these different interests and passions and how they all kind of came together in this way that just made perfect sense. I think about, my experience doing boudoir photography and feeling like I was ill equipped to deal with some of the heavy emotions that came with that. I remember doing my own shoot and feeling so empowered, but then there was also a lot of there's so much complex shit going on in your brain when you're doing that, especially for the first time, especially if you have a complex relationship with sex or your body. And so when I did that for the first time with clients, I've pretty much only shot boudoir with people that I already had a relationship with, already knew. And I was like, oh man, if I am doing this with strangers, I feel like I need to do my due diligence and do a little bit more research to be better equipped to deal with some of this stuff because it's heavy, heavy stuff. And it's so impactful for somebody. It's life-changing and transformative for someone to have a positive experience with their body and feeling empowered that way and having these images where they're like, that's me?
Yeah.
Oh my God,
Yeah.
that's me. Like that's
Yeah.
such an incredible gift to be able to give someone. And I just love that you've been able to combine that with your love for the outdoors. It's so special. It's beautiful. And if everybody listening at home, like please go check out Laura's photography page. Their work is just absolutely incredible. Beautiful, stunning imagery. Just yeah, amazing. Amazing.
Very kind of you. Um, yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, I started off using the word liberating because that's how I have felt in my own sessions. And I stopped using liberating because I don't want it tied to be, I don't want, I don't want to conflate that with like an investment in a photography session because you can be liberated in so many different ways and so many different avenues. And it doesn't have to be through like a financial investment. And like with liberation, like you're liberating from oppression, right? Like there's like that heaviness that you are breaking away from. Um, yeah, so that's so real. And there's I'm like this rabbit trail of like there's other photographers that want to just like do boudoir on the side and that's fine. Like there's if that fits for someone and you find the perfect match, like cool, great, love it. And also, I think that's why boudoir, for a lot of people, they need the time and the space to process what's going on or how their body's feeling or like taking your time. And yeah, I get nervous when I see some other folks. Not and I'm not this isn't a conversation towards you at all, but there's just like at a larger stance. I think boudoir is like seen as like, oh, we can just like do that one too. And that's fine for some people. And also, um, there are some big feelings that people have that for some people, there needs to be more space to honor and kind of hold that or process that in a way that makes them feel safer.
It's a heavy responsibility for sure. And I think that what you've described from your background and how you've prepared and how you think about it, and even just how you're talking about it now and the choice that, how thoughtful you are with just like the choice of words that you're using, like just goes to show how incredibly important it is if you are looking to do something like this, invest in boudoir photography or photography of any sort, but specifically something where you are more vulnerable to make sure that you're selecting someone who has done their research, has experience, is, going to be considering all of these things for you because it's so critical that you're well taken care of and you feel safe because otherwise the experience is not going to be the same and it's not going to be as empowering and lovely as it could be. And this kind of leads me into the next question, Laura, for you is, photography in general, especially photography in the outdoor industry. And then also, oddly enough, sometimes boudoir photography
I know where this is going.
tends, tends to be male dominated.
Hmm.
And as a woman in this field, how do you feel and how have you navigated this as a woman? So anybody who's basically like not a cishet man in this industry struggles. And I'm just wondering how you have navigated this
Yeah.
as you, Laura.
Ooh, what a good question. Well, I'm intersex, so I mean, I think it's just to highlight like being a woman or being femme is part of my identity, but not all of it. And so I think
Mhm.
I feel kind of like this, like, um, uh, I mean, I think it has, I wish I had something more intelligent to say up front, but I'm
I can
like,
see the wheels turning. It's like one of those things where you're
yeah,
like, I have so much to say. Where do I even start?
yes,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly. You get it. Okay. So I'm
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
on one end, I'm like getting into the photography or outdoorsy world. I think I know I had said like community was a big part of that. Well, I guess for photography specifically, it was more of the like, oh, I don't feel comfortable learning from men. So I'm going like generally speaking. Um, and so I'm going to do a lot of things like experimentally or self-taught or I think it kind of what you were saying earlier of like people having a bad experience and so they like kind of go into hyper individualism or hyper independent or whatever. Like I think that I had that reaction in photography. Pause. Can you hear my dog snoring in the background?
I was wondering if that was
So loud.
I was wondering if that was a dog or cars kept driving by. I was like,
No,
what is
it's my
that?
big
Oh, it's so
old
sweet.
stupid dog. Well, he's
Oh, no,
yes, but
he's not stupid. He's perfect.
he's perfect and brilliant. Okay.
Do you see? I
Anyway,
don't know if you can see my little lady in the background here.
cute. Oh my God. Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
I
she's
thought that you
always
could hear
snoozing.
him. Sorry.
It's okay. It's okay.
Hilarious. Um,
I love it.
um,
I was asking about how the photography industry in general, like broadly photography, but then also like specifically outdoor photography, tends to be very like male dominated, specifically cis heterosexual men. And then also, oddly enough, the boudoir industry sometimes tends to be a lot of cis het men as well, which is both confusing, but also makes it really difficult as someone who doesn't identify that way to navigate that industry and really make it in that field. So like I just was curious to hear your experience kind of navigating that, how you've kind of carved a niche for yourself and yeah, I don't know.
no, okay. Yes, I thank you for repeating that. I feel, well, there's a lot of straight cis men in the boudoir photography world that only photograph women, cis women, thin, white, cis women. And that's creepy. Like, there's just no other way to say it. Like, I have, I feel very strongly and very weirdly about a lot of men who are niche or like only focus on women or femmes, but it's mostly cis women. And it's just creepy. Like, there is one person in the Seattle area that is a man who's like the exception. um, and, only because people in the burlesque world have spoken so highly about him that are like, he's safe, he's great, blah, blah, like great experience, etc. So that one feels like an outlier, but the majority of like these really, I don't know, like famous or like have a huge following, like men, it feels gross to me. And, it doesn't mean that they don't create beautiful art. So I guess that's the like nuance of like, it doesn't mean that that wasn't important to the people that he photographed or that doesn't mean that the artwork wasn't beautiful. But I just think like that's weird to me. And for me personally, I like to hire people that I want to support, that I really trust, that I have a relationship with. Um, like for example, we were moving out of my partner and I were moving out of our old teeny place and moved into a like medium-sized place, and we got the other place cleaned, and I like sent the inquiry out to lots of cleaners, and there was one person that like called me back and they were like, hey, we got your inquiry, we'd really like to know. And it was just like that extra step was like, oh, like I want to support you because you are like putting in effort. um or I don't know, it just was like more relational. Anyways, So I just think when it comes to photography, it's important to me to build a relationship with the people that I work with. And it doesn't mean that I'm always the best fit for everybody. That's not to say like everyone who wants a boudoir photographer always needs to come to me because I'm the best, whatever. It's like artwork is subjective. And so everyone is going to vibe with a different person's style of physical, like artwork, but then also like personality wise, you're just going to vibe with certain people. But I just think this idea, this like, misogyny tells us that like men know how to do it best or like men are the best and should be trusted and are the experts and are like automatically assumed. And like that's sketchy to me. If you're a cis man, especially cis straight man, especially, and you only photograph thin white women, cis women, it just is weird. Um, so I don't know. Maybe I'll get some heat for that, but I'm just like it doesn't like, I'm sure their intentions are fine here and there, but it's weird. Like,
No,
we're not,
I
and
agree
I'm
with you.
also
It's
like,
weird. It's
boudoir should be for everybody. So I'm also like, where is the photograph? Like, where is the boudoir for men? Or where is the boudoir for trans men or trans women or non-binary folks or gender expansive folks? Like, where is that? Because to me, boudoir is such a beautiful mix of femme and masc vibes. And you can lean into one, you can lean into both, you could lean into neither and do your own thing. But to me, I'm like the majority of men who are in the photography space doing boudoir for mostly women is like you're doing the same old like femme, hyper femme posing in like
Mhm.
skimpy little lingerie, which is like, again, that's a vibe. Don't get me wrong. But if that's the only thing you do, like, it just feels so limiting. It feels like we're like perpetuating this binary again of like boudoir can only be for women who are like dainty and teeny tiny and like I don't know. I'm just like boudoir is like take up space, and that's why it's like outside is like you can literally take up however much space you want because I mean, with respect to the land and the other people around us. But
Yeah, no, I think the other interesting piece here about why sometimes maybe that style of photography or specifically those photographers make me feel icky is that a lot of time I'm like, who's this for? Because it doesn't seem like these photos are for this woman or for this woman's partner. It seems like these photos are for some other intention. And I don't know what that might be, whether that's just attention or, some sort of gratification on their end. But when you think about the art that like you're creating and the experience that you're curating for these people, that's the thing too. It's not just the final end product obviously matters, like you said, but it's also the actual experience that you've created for people where you've done the prep work to make them feel comfortable leading up into the shoot. And then you've created the space, which is nature, which is so lovely and healing and just expansive. And then, yeah, the actual like interpersonal aspect of like the posing and figuring out what feels good to your body and like, do you like what you're wearing? Are you comfortable in that? Do you feel like yourself? Do you feel like beautiful? And and then also the intention of like, how are you going to use these images too after the fact? Like, are they going to be something that you're going to look back on and be proud of? Like, hell yeah, I did that. Like, I'm so like when we talk about these photographers, like none of that is being taken into consideration. They're not thinking about the experience, they're not thinking about like how these people are going to feel after the fact or what they're going to do with the images. It's just kind of like this weird, I don't know, it's weird. We could probably, you and I could probably talk about this for a long time. But I do,
this
sorry, go
idea
ahead.
too of like being overly technical, I think that was the thing too when
Yeah.
I got into photography. I just like a lot of men would comment like, "Oh, the megapixels and blah blah blah." It's like I don't give a shit about that. First of all, like
What
photography
lens are you using? Does it matter?
does it matter? Like, does it matter? And like,
Yeah.
in a teeny tiny part, sure, like that might matter to a certain group of people, but I'm like, in general, so much of this is not, yeah, just like the experience. And then, I really focus on customizing artwork. So I have like artwork of myself on my walls. And it's like that daily reminder of a time where I felt so powerful and so good in my body and felt so like proud of my body. And that's the daily reminder. Like, yes, the experience of the photo session and also having daily reminders. It's like the experience of it. It's like the memories. Like, life is so short. I don't want those bad days to take over. I want tools that like remind me on the bad day is like, okay, this is a bad day, this is temporary, like my body is badass, like I'm powerful, yada yada. So I'm also like the technical side, yes, is important and there's always room for growth and like learning. But if the experience isn't good, then like it's worthless. It doesn't matter what kind of gear you have or the technical side. It just feels like not only is that like a very like men thing to do, but I'm also like it just feels very like a white person, like just like that white culture of like being very overly technical and like perfectionism that it's just like, but art is subjective and like whatever you however you relate to the art is like more important than like the technicalities and specifics.
Yeah, there's like a lot of crossover there too in the outdoorsy community of people
True.
who are like gearheads, but not in the fun way like Roland, who I interviewed earlier on the podcast, like
Yes.
in the toxic, like I'm better than you because I can afford this fancy thing kind of way.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yep.
okay, well, all right.
Yep.
I do want to, I think that you and I could probably talk about like photography and the nuances of boudoir in particular, like for a very long time. But I do want to kind of pivot back to thinking about the outdoors and kind of belonging, because one of the most beautiful things about the work that you do is the level of representation in your clientele. And that's because you've helped people feel comfortable in their own skin. And I think that that is something that some people really struggle with, especially in the outdoor community. There is rampant fat phobia in the outdoor community, and you've experienced this firsthand. I'm sure the majority of our listeners who exist in a bigger body have experienced some level of this, whether it's just lacking access to even the gear that they need and can fit into and keep them safe, or, so far as, really explicit outward shitty comments from terrible people, or it's just weird microaggressions and looks on the trail. I think that historically the outdoor industry is just pretty overall fat phobic, even though we've made strides, it's still we got a long way to go. So like how have you navigated this particular challenge both for you personally and for your clients?
Like community, like sharing gear has been so helpful. I know my friend Tashian with Ascent Fitness has like put on like a gear event where people can like go and try different types of gear out and like feel it in person, because we all have to order it online if we want to get anything. So it's just like even that, as simple as like having it in your hand, is helpful. um Oh my God, there's so much. Like, um, I think, yeah, sharing gear whenever possible, like asking questions with other people that, recommendations for like what to wear, like underwear or not, or none, or like clothes, gear. I mean, all the things like shoes, all of that are so helpful in community to like ask questions. Um, so much of it is just inaccessible to borrow, rent, to, purchase. It's so expensive. um yeah, I think weirdly enough, um a lot of the people in my boudoir photography, like being around other people is the thing that makes them the most nervous, or like how they will be perceived outside. And yet that is the thing that they walk away, maybe one of the most powerful things about the experience is like taking up space and also like wearing lingerie outside, and not giving a fuck what other people think. Like, has been really powerful. I know for me, like when I'm wearing lingerie outside, like it's one of my favorite things because I can get so in my head, and that, it's not just a me problem, right? It's like a very real systemic problem. And also like I'll approach, being outside, like being anxious, like doing self-portraits, for example, and just like feeling nervous or timid. And then like once I get like a glare or a stare, or like someone gives me, it's like passive Pacific Northwest. So like it's usually nonverbal. But as soon as I get that kind of reaction, it's almost like an empowerment moment to be like, oh, and that's it. Like, fuck you. Like, I actually don't care what you think. So it just like emboldens me more to like be less clothed, or, whatever. Like, it obviously in respect to Washington state law and our, blah, 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 the people around us, yada, yada. But, um, anyways, yeah, I think it's community, and also like doing it with each other. Like I wear lingerie with my clients because I'm like, this is important. Like we're in it together. You know what I mean? Like this isn't just them being exposed or vulnerable. Like we heal in community. We're in this together. So as much as possible that.
I love that. I actually didn't know, maybe I did know that and just forgot about it, but I didn't realize that you two also wear lingerie with your clients when you're
Yeah.
out with them. And I guess I never really thought about the why behind that because yeah, I do think that it's a different experience to have someone be like fully clothed or like in hiking gear taking your photo versus like, yeah, I'm gonna get on your level and we're gonna be in this together. I think that's so lovely and empowering.
Yeah, and I mean, think probably similar to just just enjoying outside, like it's helpful to show people like where they are, or like, I try to do the movements as much as possible or the posing or whatever, and try to walk there first, or just try to give like notes about accessibility, because trails and outdoors are not always physically accessible to all bodies. So I think having that, location scouting, yada yada, beforehand, which just means more time outside, and I love it.
Yeah, awesome. I love it. I think one of the big things about just the outdoors in general is kind of what you're touching on there is that like the unknown is so intimidating, especially, if you're a beginner and you've never really had much experience outdoors. I think very similarly for people who haven't had their photo professionally taken, they're like, I don't know what to do with my face or my hands. I don't know what to do. I think both with the outdoors and with photography, a lot of people just exclude themselves because they're like, I'm not an expert. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not going to do it. What would you tell someone who is feeling this way right now?
Say, please don't listen to that. Like, please don't listen to that inner voice that is lying. And it's not you. Like, I understand where that message is coming from. And I don't know. I'm just like, life is so short. Like, I don't know if you've lost anyone close to you, but I'm just like, that can wake you up to be like, life is so short. If I want to do it, I want to fucking do it. Like, why not? Like, if you have the ability to and the means to, um, I'm just like, please don't let fear make that decision for you. Like, please don't miss out on something because you feel like you're not enough, for those feelings. Those feelings are temporary, but I think it can be so powerful and liberating actually doing the thing and proving that message wrong, you know?
Completely agree. It's so empowering. And then when you do something that you didn't ever think that you would do, or maybe even
Yes.
you've never even seen someone who looks like you doing, and you do it, you're just like, oh yeah, hell, oh my God, I'm such a badass. And then that
Yes.
helps fuel you
Yep.
forever. So yeah, it's just getting over that initial fear. But I do think that like a lot of people who, especially people who exist in marginalized bodies, whether that be you're in a bigger body or you are a different skin color from the majority of the people out on the trail that you see, like a lot of these fears, and anybody who doesn't fall within the gender binary expression of outward expression, all of these people have very real fears because historically we hear these terrible stories of people having violence enacted against them or violent things yelled at them on the trail or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But and so I don't want anybody hearing this to feel invalidated in their fear, because that fear is real and it's totally valid. I think it's important though to remember that the majority of the community, the majority of people out there on the trail are actually like good people and do want to help you and will most likely not do anything to harm you. Maybe they'll give you a little glare, but Laura, like you said, like use that as fuel, use that as something to kind of empower you. And just your act of existing in the outdoors is an act of rebellion, and I think that that's beautiful and so powerful to remember.
Yeah, it's definitely nuanced to be like, yeah, like challenge yourself in safe places with safe people. Um, and yeah, it's totally valid if it's like not now and like there's no pressure to do anything you're not comfortable with, or if it doesn't feel safe, like always trust your intuition. And also like the nuance part of it is like, and also like we don't have to fall in line with those messages. So like if there's something that sounds exciting to you or something that sounds interesting to you and you can't find anyone and you do all your due diligence, like yes, please feel empowered to like make it happen. Life is way too short.
I completely agree. I want to get into some of these last few questions here. One is just kind of about balance, about kind of like how we encourage people to feel more welcome in the outdoors while also like respecting the land that we're in. You know, like one of the things that you've talked a lot about is feeling like liberated and feeling like empowered in our bodies and taking up space in nature. But then you've always kind of like caveated with like, but also in a respectful way that's, you know, like acknowledging the incredible privilege we have to have access to these lands and stuff. I'm just curious to hear your thoughts and perspective there of how we can strike that balance, especially when we think about how the majority of us are recreating on, I mean, all of us, we're all recreating on stolen land. So yeah, I feel like this is probably something that you've thought about and would just love to hear your thoughts on how to strike this balance.
Yeah. Do you have 15,000 hours for us to talk about this? I'm like, this this is such a beautiful question because anything I have ever learned about being in relationship with the land is from Indigenous people and from Black and Brown people as a whole. Um, and I have been very frustrated with, for some reason on TikTok, I'm getting lots more videos of people complaining about sites being trashed or not share, like very intentionally not sharing locations. And I am such a big fan, like I'm such a big fan of sharing locations because there's so much gatekeeping in the outdoor community. And one of those ways is a lot of white people who have the privilege, right, of growing up and having access to outdoors, um, and getting to location scout in and of itself is a privilege. And just like not sharing those, like only perpetuates and only perpetuates like the outdoorsy being mostly white, because we also know white people tend to only be friends with white people. Um, and so there's that, and then there's this complaining about without educating, and it's total like it is balance of like we want to be respectful to the land, and so and also we also this isn't my land. Like why would I have the audacity to gatekeep something from other people when it's not mine to begin with? And so there's that feels like almost a nuanced conversation, but I think what I have decided to do, especially recently, is bringing a trash bag. And like before a session, I'll like clean up a little bit, or if I notice anything, I'll take it out with me. Or, I try to educate to my clients like what leave no traces and how we do that in our sessions. And, you know, I think a lot of it is education and bringing people along with you, especially if you are a white person. That's our responsibility, is also um, doing the education on how to take care of the land. I know there's like on my mind has been like, I don't know if there's a better name for this, but like guerrilla gardening. So like, throwing out seeds, and some folks do that with non-native plants, and that can be really harmful. And so like finding, native plants to like give literally back to the land as we are stomping on the trails. um or like taking up space outside. I think it feels like a balance of both, of like, yes, take up space and also stay on trail. Like, yes, go outside and come with me. And also like, let's pick up trash because there are children and like people that don't have access, or maybe they need to leave in a hurry and they didn't catch everything. What the fuck ever. It's like that to me feels like, okay, this is what community is like, I'm going to pour in as much as I get out. And I get so much out of being outside, and I get so much fueled in me when I'm outdoors. And so to me, I'm like, okay, this is just part of the reciprocity of like, I'm going to like then invest in, I don't know, taking extra 5 minutes to like pick up a couple of things or throw some wildflower seeds or whatever. I haven't done that yet. I still, anyways, but so those are some things on my mind. It's like, it just feels like a little bit of a tug and war, but I saw a podcast clip on TikTok where it was two photographers talking about, they were like giggling about like gatekeeping a location and like, oh, I spent so much time location scouting, and I would never give that away to someone who I don't know. And I'm like, I understand. Like I feel that, like I spend a lot of times location scouting, and part of me is like, no, I did all of the work. I get to keep it. But then the other part of me is like, what the fuck is that about? Like there are other people who want to be outside, and that's like coming from a scarcity mindset of like, oh, they'll hire someone else. Like, okay, then what? Like, I don't know, just kind of like that comes from such a scarcity mindset and like a competition. Like, it feels like very capitalistic to be like, no, it's I'm going to be against you or I'm going to fight against you for this place. But like the location in of itself isn't the thing that makes me unique as a photographer. So that clip in and of itself like really bothered me for multiple reasons. Cause I'm like, again, two white photographers talking about gatekeeping locations just does not come across well. Um, but I think that happens a lot. Like, I think that they're speaking to an experience that a lot of white people do outside. It's like, we don't tag, or like the don't tag, keep Washington beautiful. It's like, well, you could tag and then also bring people along or like teach them about like how to take care of the land if you have all of this education with you. So there's that.
Yeah, I think there's so much that you said there that I want to unpack, and I think, we could probably do like a whole follow-up podcast on, honestly, but like one of the things that this gets me thinking about this whole concept of gatekeeping specifically from photographers, it's always very baffling to me that photographers will behave in that particular way and be super gatekeepy when they are profiting off of the land. It would be different if it was like, not that it would be necessarily better, but it definitely would be different if it was just an individual citizen going out and finding a cool hike that they share on social media and they're like, I'm not sharing. Like, that's different. But for me, a lot of the time when I see a lot of this gatekeeping behavior, it's from big influencers who are making money off of it, or it's from photographers who are making money off of it. I see this a lot in the elopement photography space. A lot of people making a lot of money off of land that doesn't belong to them. And it's very interesting to me that they somehow feel some level of ownership or claim over the space. And yeah, it's a very odd culture that's kind of sprung up between these people, and like you said, it's oftentimes not accompanied by any other resources about education or anything like that. It's just shared blatantly, or it's like, okay, well, what are people supposed to do?
Right.
It's just
Yeah.
it's really it's a very interesting conversation to be had. And obviously on this podcast too, I'm having on a lot of, larger content creators and stuff who are like, yeah, I the only way I will share a location of somewhere is if I'm also sharing a bunch of tips about how to protect that space. And that's the only reason. And the thing that I'm hearing from you and that I've learned specifically also from the amazing resources and teachings that have become available to me from Indigenous people, from Black and Brown people, is the intentionality behind what you're doing fucking matters. Like,
Yeah.
that matters. What your intention is with the land, that is what matters. What you're doing, Laura, is very different from what a lot of other photographers are doing out there. You are helping people come into their own, feeling empowered in their bodies, healing their relationship with nature, with themselves, with their sexuality. Like, is that is like sacred, right? And that is okay. Whereas a lot of other people are just exploiting the land for their own profit and without any regard for how they're giving back or how they can give back in the future, even if they don't have the resources right now. It's just, it really matters what your intent is behind it. And that's why even at the very beginning of this podcast, you were talking about how your relationship with being like outdoorsy shifted when you realized you didn't have to be like conquering something. You don't have to be like, climbing to the top of a mountain. You don't even have to be completing a hike. It can just be going out and enjoying. And like, I didn't come to that realization until I heard some of the teachings from the Indigenous community, and that completely changed my perspective on it. So yeah, I could talk, as you can tell, I could talk about this for a long time, but I just think a lot of what you said really resonates with me, and I hope resonates with a lot of the people listening today.
Yeah. 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 I appreciate that perspective about profiting off the land too. It's such a, yeah, it's something that I am considering in my business as well, of like how to give back financially and finding hyper local indigenous groups and communities to give back to, and as much as possible directly to people, not organizations. But um, Yeah, so if anyone here has suggestions, send them my way. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, also like financial piece aside, you are being intentional and educating your clients about leave no trace and how to be better stewards of the outdoors. So like you are giving back in a way, and like even just thinking about this and talking about it is more than what most people do. So like you're already like obviously we would all love to just like give all of our money, like take it all, but like I want to acknowledge and hold space for the fact that like you have been very intentional about the way in which you've conducted your business and kind of built this out. And so I think that there's something to be said there too, which not all people do, and that's admirable. So
Yeah, but I appreciate that. It's like the both and of like, okay, yes,
yeah,
like here's what we're doing, and also what could we do in addition to. So yeah, I
right.
appreciate
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, but also anybody listening to this at home, yeah, we're always like I know you and I both are always open to like learning and changing and growing and adapting to things, and I will never pretend like I know everything. I definitely do not. I learned so much from you in this conversation. I learned so much from everybody I talk to. So like if there's more that we can be doing or other ideas people have about how we can, be giving back to the land that we are recreating on and, photographing at or whatever it might be, like let us know. Um, but yeah, I do want to wrap up this conversation with just kind of ending on a note of inclusivity, like final pieces of advice for anybody who is feeling like they don't belong in the outdoorsy community, but they want to, and for whatever reason that might be. What advice do you have for them, Laura?
it. I'm just like, if you're fat, neurodivergent like me, you are so loved and you are allowed to take up that space.
Amazing. Cannot have said it better myself. So, Laura, tell us what's next for you. Do you have any upcoming projects? Where can people find you online? What would you like to plug?
Yeah, yeah. Um, TikTok and Instagram, it's Laura Brooks, LauraBrooks, laurabrooks.boudoir and laurabrooks.families. My website is laurabrooks.art.art. If you're interested in a session, would love to work with you. And also come to Fat Swim. I host a monthly Fat Swim. It's the fourth Saturday of every month. Right now it's indoors. I'm asking folks to test negative for COVID before joining, but it's 2 hours to swim and be in community with fat people. So if you're interested, that's also on my website, or you can just DM me for the link or wherever.
Amazing. And I'll have all of those links too in the show notes and the YouTube description wherever you're watching this. So please, yeah, please click through and support Laura. Her work is just so gorgeous. It's so just refreshing and lovely. And yeah, Laura, you are so talented. And I just appreciate you so much for coming on here and sharing your knowledge and your wisdom with this amazing outdoorsy community. Your perspective is so valuable. And yeah, just thank you so much.
I appreciate you. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you everybody who's listening for joining us on this episode of Outdoorsy. Be sure to like and subscribe wherever you are listening to your podcast, or if you're watching this video episode on YouTube. If you are interested in joining the Outdoorsy community, we also have a Patreon, and so you can become a patron and join our Discord server there too. Laura will be on there. I haven't told Laura this yet, but you get access to Discord as well if you want to be on there. So yeah, if you want to join that, all of these links also will be available to you in the show notes. But thank you for listening, and remember, you belong out there.